Is poor form making it so that the NFL is causing more injuries? We'll find out this week on Iceman and Coach. Welcome back, Icetime Nation. You're probably wondering what in the blue hell is going on here. I'm calling the show something else, and that's correct. This is the Iceman and Sports Coach. Good God, the Iceman and Coach Sports Show. And you probably are listening and thinking, what happened to Drippin' Sports? Well, when I started this show way back, June of 2021, the world was a different place back then. I was in a different place back then. It was really in the image of myself. And I was the only person on this team. And now we have added a second person in the coach. And honestly, even in the back of my mind, I knew that it wasn't going to be the same and that at some point it was going to change. And now that we have found our groove, we are opening the era of the Iceman and Coach Sports Show from here on out. So, Coach, welcome to the show. The new era has begun.
Iceman. Yeah, man, it is awesome. I'm really excited about the new direction, and I cannot tell you enough how much I appreciate you including me in all this, and it's just super exciting. I do think that we are finding our groove and moving into a really exciting direction. At the very least, you and I are going to enjoy this process.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to enjoy the process. And if you think about it, this is the way I think about it anyway. Think about when Mike and Mike started, or any of the sports shows that we know today, Colin Cowherd, Jim Rome, they all started somewhere. And some of them added people, some of them didn't add people. But in the end, they all moved on and evolved in their own way. And when I brought you on board, it became ours, not just mine. And so I felt like it was in need of a change at some point, and I wanted to give it a little bit more of a sports radio flair. And I think that we're going for that aesthetic. I think we've reached it a little behind the scenes here, but we have added so much in the last 6 weeks. I know the listeners appreciate it, and I know for me creatively, I definitely appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Like you said, with evolution, if you're not evolving, you're dying. And I think that we're doing the right things as far as trying to grow the show and to kind of paint it in, both of our images a little bit, which is really exciting. So beyond that, any other exciting news from you over the weekend?
Not really, outside of the fact that daycares continue to be America's petri dishes, and the kid brings home ungodly and obscene amounts of germs that I, as a near 40-year-old man, apparently haven't seen in a very, very long time. And I just continue to keep getting sick every 2 weeks or so. And we were worried about COVID there for a while. We really should have been locking down the damn daycares.
Yeah, I ever since our daughter got into public school, it's just been a whole new ball game. And I remember it kind of hit me one day when we were talking about how often our 2-year-old son has gotten sick, throughout his lifetime. And I'm like, well, duh. Our daughter didn't have an older sibling that was going to school every day, bringing home God knows what, and the little guy has that battle to fight. And so it was a tough week for us, man. Over the across the weekend with some illness and things like that, it forced me and my daughter to miss our soccer game on Saturday, and got a couple parents that stepped up and coached the team. Sounded like they got a victory, so I told the mom who coached. She texted me and told me. I said, "Well, you're hired. I'll gladly step aside." But we have the last game coming up this Saturday. Looking forward to that for numerous reasons, but probably the number one reason would be to maybe at least stay undefeated.
That is about the most indictment of indictments that you could have on your coaching prowess, leaving for 1 week and having them get the victory when you have had losses become, or excuse me, wins grasped from you, and literally grasped from you in certain aspects. But enough about that. I was going to ask for an update, but hey, there is no update to be made. So speaking of poor play, speaking of coaches not know what they're doing, you said something offline that I wanted to get into. Now, last week we talked about Tua, and I thought we had a really good discussion. I thought Alex had a great question. We talked about that, and I thought that we really kind of gathered ourselves and really got down to the bottom of the issue. Well, there has been some unintended consequences, I think, of what has happened since everything related to Tua. Obviously, the public outrage caused him to not play this week, and what we have seen now is a lot more head injuries. You pointed that out to me offline, and you had a theory that poor and sloppy play, specifically tackling, was leading to some of these injuries, at least head injuries, that you have seen in terms of what's on the field. But also, I think that the hesitancy now about the NFL and its optics is leading the referees to referee in a different way, to the point that we are seeing roughing the quarterback plays, or excuse me, roughing the quarterback calls that really are just penalties for guys playing football.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of an evolution to this. Step one, which was the right step, was to find ways to take the head out of tackling. The way that tackling was taught when I grew up playing youth football and the way that I was teaching it when I started coaching football were two totally different styles of tackling. And rightfully so, because the game had evolved a little bit to take the head out of tackling in the interest of preventing these traumatic brain injuries. So let's move forward to the game and the rules and how it's being officiated. You've seen year over year the protection that the quarterbacks get increase significantly. We've seen a lot more, now that the targeting rule is in play. I think that they're more. It's more geared towards the head, though, right? It's always about the head. Are you hitting with your head? Are you hitting someone in the head? And I don't blame coaching staffs necessarily for the technique because I'm not sure what technique I would try to coach. um, Luckily, I'm not in the business of trying to come up with it anymore, but it's tough to tackle a guy, especially at full speed. If he's running full speed, you're running full speed. It is tough to make a tackle on a professional athlete or a college athlete, or really anyone for that matter, and not have the head be involved in some way, shape, or form. And I do think that what we're seeing now are more of these, what I call wrap and whip style tackles, where you're seeing them grab someone around the waist, sort of throw their body around them, and then they rip the person down over their body, which is causing this whiplash situation where the back of the head is hitting the turf. That's what happened to Tua
Hmm.
twice, right? I saw it happen numerous times on Sunday in different games, and it's I'm like, this is the problem is the way these guys have to tackle now. It's leading to more head injuries. Now I don't know what the answer is. I wish I did. In regards to the quarterback position, I was speaking to my dad about this. I said it wouldn't surprise me if we get to a point where there's a timer, like 7 seconds. If the ball's not out in 7 seconds, like the play's dead, just to avoid these crazy hits. And I mean, that would change the game completely. But if you think about how much it's changed already, it's insane. You know, some of the flags we saw thrown this weekend, the um, Tom Brady one and the one on Carr last night were insane. And or maybe it just becomes where the quarterback's two hand touch from now on. But it would not shock me one bit if we get to something like that at some point.
The crazy part, though, is they're trying to legislate violence, but only for quarterbacks. Like, there's not as much of this in the skill position guys. And yes, they have tried to make it so that guys going across the middle, defenseless receivers or defenseless players, aren't as inbounds the way that they used to be. But it seems like quarterbacks are the ones getting these rules, making it less, well, making players less able to actually hit them. And like I said earlier, I mean, the penalties that you talked about, Brady and Derek Carr, those were basically penalized for tackling, like legitimate tackling that we've seen countless times. I didn't see a dangerous aspect to either of those. And this is all from the Tua effect. But as you eloquently pointed out, it's been an evolution for a long time. And I think the fundamental crux of the issue for me is the NFL is trying to make a violent sport not violent. There's never going to be a way to do that unless, as you pointed out, you change the game fundamentally and make it so that it's really not football anymore. And I think that their ratings and their money will just plummet if they do something like that.
And no, you're absolutely right. And to kind of reiterate what you said about there being almost a different set of rules, or at least a different level of emphasis between the quarterbacks and the other players on the field, I think that the NFL will never say this, but my belief is the reason you see that is these quarterbacks dictate so much who watches and how many people watch these football games. You're not going to not tune in to watch. Um, I don't know, name a team. You're not going to not watch the Bills if Stefan Diggs is out, right? That's not going to keep you from turning the game on. But if they said, "Hey, Josh Allen isn't playing this week or the rest of the season," like, you might as well cancel their season. I mean,
That's a good point.
yeah, we've seen backups come in and everything else, but like it is devastating to a team's production as far as wins, and also to um, the ratings and the money that's generated through people tuning in to watch these games.
You're 100% right. And the NFL is going to watch their back. I mean, they talk a big game about the shield and all that kind of stuff with integrity, and they're trying to manage optics at every turn, and there's just no way that you're going to be able to do it in such a way that basically it's never violent. And I think the only path that I could see is that the violent sport that we know of football ends up being played by people who literally have no choice. It becomes almost a combat sport, the way that boxing and MMA are. And then you have another avenue where it's a lot less like what we know. Maybe it is touch football or flag football or who knows. And maybe there is an appetite for that. But I just think the NFL is in a terrible position. But now, though, I've seen a lot of banter back and forth, people saying you can't, on one hand, complain about Tua, but then complain about the officiating because they're directly correlated. And my argument all along has been we always overcorrect. It doesn't have to be football, it's literally everything in this country. We overcorrect all the time when something happens to the point that it takes away from what we originally knew. And so now, how are teams supposed to beat guys like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, who already have an advantage because they're so skilled? And now they're going to be able to basically do whatever they want because if they're in the pocket long enough and they get hit, it's going to be a flag. And that is game changing a lot of times.
It absolutely is, and you see sometimes the ones that aren't called and these quarterbacks' reactions. They'll look at the official and they'll throw their hands up like, "Hey, why aren't you calling this?" It's like, man, these guys have come to expect almost any time they are taken to the ground or contact is made with them that there's supposed to be a call made. It's absolutely insane. And you're right when you mention optics. That's what they're doing. The NFL is trying to manage optics at every turn. But I'll say this much: I think they do it as good, or if not better, than any other pro sports league.
Oh, for sure. I mean, because people are still coming to games in droves, they're still watching it, paying money. I mean, it's a $1 billion industry. So you're absolutely right about that. But one other point I want to make and I want to ask about is the fact that what about quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray, guys that get out of the pocket, who use their legs to actually get big chunks of yards? What we traditionally know is that once you leave the pocket, you're fair game, whether you're a quarterback or not. You become a runner. And how are the officials going to handle it when a guy like Lamar breaks free and gets absolutely lambasted out on the field? Is that going to be roughing the passer now? Is that going to be unnecessary roughness? Is you think we're going to see some stuff like that? Because again, as you pointed out, guys have to tackle differently.
I just think it depends on the nature of the tackle, but I agree that once you leave the pocket, or maybe we could even extend it as far as to once you cross the line of scrimmage, you're a ball carrier, and you
Hmm.
should be able to be treated like a ball carrier. One thing that I kind of have a problem with that I've seen a few times is the fake slide. I don't think you should be able to fake a slide if you're a quarterback because the second you start your slide, those guys are supposed to not touch you. And I think it was in a college game somewhere I saw a clip of a quarterback who like went to fake a slide and then ran for another 10, 20 yards or something. Like that should not be allowed. If you fake a slide, I mean, it should be a 15-yard penalty or something very serious because the intention of the rule is to protect you, and you should not be able to use that to your advantage. Do I think we'll see more aggressive calls against quarterbacks when they become ball carriers? I don't think so. I do think that the fact that Lamar and Kyler are these prolific runners hurts them more than anyone else. While it's such a great weapon, you see these teams reluctant to offer them long term deals because they know that they're one hit away from not playing anymore.
Shorter shelf life for sure. Speaking of a short shelf life, the St. Louis Cardinals, your cousin Alex came here, was very adamant about the fact that the Phillies couldn't hit, they couldn't put balls in play, and the Phillies swept the Cardinals right out of the wild card round, and they are back home. And I wanted to know, had you heard from Alex a little bit of a wellness check? Is he okay?
Yeah, he was very confident, wasn't he?
He was he was in
And
there like it was the most confident he was the whole show.
absolutely. And I reached out over the weekend and I didn't hear anything back until today. And he clarified. He's like, "Yeah, I had to take a couple days to sort of deal with that." Which, that's cool. I do think that there's something to be said about loving sports. I think it's nice to invest yourself into something that you have no control over for entertainment's sake. I think it's healthy to some degree, and I admire his fandom. And I know though he's not the type of guy that's going to check out though by any means. He's going to be engaged through the rest of the postseason because he loves baseball and all the stats and analytics that come along with it.
I just absolutely love that his first ever appearance on a podcast, he claims that the Phillies can't do X, Y, and Z and just sweep. I mean, it couldn't have been a more poetic justice for his take. And just, he's out there on tape. Like the first time he's ever out there, he is so incredibly wrong, and maybe that's what's entertaining. You always say that.
It is, man. We specialize in that here at the Ice Time and Coach Show.
That's right, we do. So, speaking of terrible play, Thursday night football. Now, we had that on Crunch Time last week, and I had it on there almost as a joke because your Colts were playing on Thursday night football, and hey, prime time. I did call it, I listened back to just make sure I got the wording correct. I called it the shitfest of the week last week, and boy, oh boy, did it live up to expectations to the point where Al Michaels, we're talking about guy who called the Miracle on Ice, said live on the broadcast, this is like watching the, was it like the fifth level CBS broadcast? I mean, just shitting on it on national television. And I have to ask, what the hell?
It's bad. Both of those teams cannot put it together. I'm most shocked by how bad the Broncos are because I really thought that Russell Wilson was going to catapult them into being a Super Bowl contender. Well, I think I talked about that weeks ago, and he has done anything but that. And it makes you sort of look at the Seahawks and think maybe that it wasn't Russ that was holding that thing together. And I will talk more about that here in a little while, but maybe Russ moving on might have been an upgrade. It might have been addition by subtraction in that case. And as far as the Colts go, they just don't have the pieces. You can't hang it all on Matt Ryan. He's on his way out, and he doesn't have much left in the tank. But they don't have. I mean, they have Jonathan Taylor, but he isn't being the Jonathan Taylor we knew last year. And I just don't think they have the pieces in the passing game to compete at the level that we've kind of expected from the Colts over the last decade or two. And interesting. I saw a stat where they talked about how Carson Wentz, when he was with the Colts, he was like the ninth rated quarterback or something like that. And even he wasn't necessarily the problem in Indianapolis. It's more of a wide range lack of talent issue.
You can forgive the Colts for their performance because coming in, they didn't have Jonathan Taylor. He was out. And they don't have a lot of pieces to your point. They're playing in Denver. It's a tough place to play. But just given the start for the Broncos, I don't understand what's going on. We thought it was Nathaniel Hackett for a while, but I've been very adamant that I didn't think Russ was that kind of guy. I've kind of disagreed with you. We didn't disagree on air, but I've kind of always had that mentality that maybe Russ isn't the guy everybody thinks that he is. And what we're seeing here is just, it's terrible. I mean, to the point where there was a flashback. Richard Sherman was one of the people doing the game, at least in terms of the halftime crew. And at the end of the game, they had to get 1 yard. It's like fourth down or something like that. And they didn't run the ball. They passed and they couldn't get it. And he was losing his mind in the post game because he's like, it's 1 yard. And he's been there because they lost a Super Bowl because they decided to pass at the 1 yard line. I have a hot take about that. I don't think that was as egregious of a call as people say, because I bet you 8 times out of 10 that actually works out, but you always play the result. Anyway, I find it interesting, but there was news this week that basically said that Russ is playing hurt. And I don't want to downplay an injury from a guy. It just feels very convenient.
Yeah, if you're hurt, why couldn't you be hurt 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? Why do you wait until your back's against the wall to throw out an injury, or I want to say an excuse, and maybe that's not a fair statement, but I don't think that he is. You were right. We kind of talked about it off air. You were right. I was wrong. I really thought he was gonna, like I said, catapult them to the next level, and that has not been the case.
I don't think it's victory lap time. I mean, you're 6 weeks into the season or 5 weeks into the season, but it just feels like something isn't right. And it's the whole situation. And Russ, to me, he's such a company guy. And I'm not sure he's the kind of personality that can come in, go into the coach and say, hey, something's not right here. I think he's actually saying yes, sir, no, sir, all the time. And I think that's to his detriment. And that's one of the things we heard in Seattle with the Legion of Boom, that he didn't really get along with a lot of the players on that defense. I think what they said was he wasn't black enough. And I can't speak to that, obviously. But my point being is, like, is he so corporate and so yes man that potentially that hinders him from being able to come into this team and take over? If he's that talented, shouldn't he be able to take over and have a little bit of leeway? Like the Rodgers, the Bradys, the Mahomes, those guys are talented enough that they get a little bit of a pass to ad lib.
Well, and I thought part of the reason he left Seattle is him and Pete Carroll butted heads a little bit, Maybe I'm not accurate on that, but I've also heard that in Denver, he has like his own specialized individual locker room or something. That to me doesn't scream like team guy to me, anyways. And maybe there is a locker room situation there. Maybe those guys can't bring themselves to rally around him and or whatever else. I don't know. I can't speak, I guess, to what type of teammate he is because I've never been there, done that. But just some of the rumors I've heard, it doesn't sound great.
The look on your face when I said he wasn't black enough was priceless, by the way. And so maybe we'll cut that in post. But either way, all right, let's get off of bad football. I want to talk about good football. Well, actually, questionably good football. So the NFC East, which I think you and I both agreed coming into the season was mediocre at best. We saw one pretty good team, and the rest of them were probably going to be middling around mediocre or below average. And we're sitting here today. It is October 11th when we are recording this episode. The Eagles are 5-0. The Cowboys with Cooper Rush are 4-1, and the New York Football Giants are 4-1, each winning this week, and the Giants getting what has to be the most impressive win, beating the Packers in London. Is this the best division in football?
On paper, yeah, I guess. But in reality, I don't think so. I haven't seen anything from the Cowboys or Giants that like jumps off the page at me. But again, they keep going out and finding ways to win. I was really thinking that was it Sunday night, the Rams were gonna have their way with the Cowboys, and that just wasn't the case. I was sadly disappointed. Was it Sunday? Yeah, was it Sunday night? Right? Was the
No,
Rams
it
Cowboys, or
was in
was
the
it
425 hour.
okay?
Yeah.
But it felt like Sunday night then. Anyways, I really thought that the Rams were going to come out and sort of put them in their place, and they did not do that. The Eagles are 5-0. I have not been a believer, but you can't sit there and argue with the record. And the Giants at 4-1 is the most puzzling to me, I would say.
It's also the most fraudulent. There's no way that's going to last. I mean, good for Brian Dayball and all that. You know, he's coaching his ass off. Right now, I would say that if the season ended today, you'd have two of the top candidates for coach of the year in the same damn division, and Mike McCarthy, unbelievably, and new coach Brian Dayball. I mean, hey, they're coaching their ass off. You get wins. That's what you have to do. That's what you get paid to do. So good for them on getting wins. The Cowboys will be in an interesting conundrum because I think right now they're leaning on a very, very good defense, which is putting a ton of pressure on just about every team that they play. And Cooper Rush isn't losing the football game because their defense has allowed them to be able to play very conservatively and not turn the ball over. But I'm curious what's going to happen when they play a high scoring team. Like, I have no confidence that they'll be able to get to Mahomes and contain him the way that they've been able to contain some of these other guys. I mean, the Rams, maybe that's impressive, but not even really a home field advantage for them. Matt Stafford has to be hurt. His elbow has to be feeling not great. And the Rams look like they are completely hungover from last year. Like, they won theirs and they're done.
Yeah, they have not been very impressive, and it's been sad to see because it's still a very talented group for sure, well coached. To your point about the Cowboys and Cooper Rush, I don't think that the gap between Cooper Rush and Dak Prescott is that great, and that's not
Whoa.
because I think Cooper Rush is that good. I just don't think Dak Prescott is that good.
Hot
And
take.
so the gap I don't think is that large. I get that, Dak Prescott is the shiny expensive thing, but if you look at production on the field, and granted we're only going through a few games, but if you look at production, the gap is not great, and you may have a quarterback controversy at the end of this year. We'll see how the rest of the season goes, but I
Well,
think it's possible.
ladies and gentlemen, the start of the Cooper Rush fan club right here. With good Lord. So you really don't think that there is a chasm between the two of those guys?
No, it's because I don't think Dak's that good. I've never been overly impressed with Dak. I think he's been a little overrated. And so because of that, I don't think that there's a huge discrepancy.
To be fair, he's had a lot of weapons recently, and they've really not done anything of substance. And making the playoffs, fine, but they haven't won a playoff game yet. And they haven't won a playoff game for a very, very long time.
So what happens if Cooper Rush is the guy to do it? What then?
My question to you, though, is what do the Cowboys do? Because as you know, you have to win now when a guy is paid cheap. But if they win a Super Bowl with Cooper Rush, that's not the future. So, like, if they win it with Cooper Rush and Dak is healthy, do they move on from Dak and try to start over? Because there's no future in Cooper Rush. He's been in the league forever.
He probably gets like the Nick Foles treatment. sell high, try, go to one of these struggling franchises that just has a revolving door at the quarterback position, be like the Panthers or somewhere like that. They'll be the next Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett, the guy that starts half a season somewhere.
It's just amazing to me that there are two quarterbacks in the league who have taken a ring away from Tom Brady, and one of them will forever be Nick Foles, who did absolutely nothing else in his career, like nothing else. And the Jags gave him a bunch of money and then just benched his ass after he got hurt. Like that's how not great Nick Foles was. Nick Foles, if you looked up lightning in a bottle in the dictionary, you would see his face. I used to say that and feel that way about Eli Manning. I know Eli Manning is a little bit more talented than that, but man, that Philadelphia team that year just, yeah, whatever.
It almost goes to show you though too how talented all of these guys are, that there really isn't that big of a margin in some cases, that it comes down to the little things, maybe the talent around them, a little bit of luck, the ball bouncing their way, being able to protect them, so on and so forth. Being in the right place at the right time has a lot to do with it. And because Tom Brady, if Drew Bledsoe never gets hurt, maybe we never even freaking hear of Tom Brady. It's just unbelievable and super fascinating how some of these circumstances play out.
By the way, that recently was on TV because I think it was the 20-year anniversary or 21-year anniversary of it. And that hit on Bledsoe, I'm not even sure that it got a penalty back then. So think about how much the game has changed. You got a punctured lung on that play. And that was pretty much like, yeah, it's part of the game now.
Nope, absolutely. The game has changed so much.
Man, that hit was brutal. I used to love Drew Bledsoe, but quarterbacks I don't love, and apparently neither does Ron Rivera. Did you hear his press conference this week when asked directly what was the difference between the Washington Commanders and the rest of these successful teams in the NFC East?
Quarterback, right?
Unbelievably brutal, but I guess in my mind, what is he supposed to say other than that? I mean, as a coach, is that too forward? Is that too blunt? But if that's what it is I mean, he clarified more after that. But I was curious how you took that. You've never probably had to talk to the media as part of your coaching job, and you never would throw a kid under the bus. But if you were a professional coach, would you be that honest?
I don't know. I'm a big believer that you keep a lot of that stuff internal unless you feel like your hand is forced or there's something really egregious. Maybe the player's a gigantic asshole or something like that. Carson Wentz doesn't strike me as that type of individual. I think that you handle that behind closed doors. Carson Wentz is a pro. He's been a pro for a while. I'm sure he knows he's not playing very well. And he's really not even playing that poorly. Statistically, he's not playing that poorly. He I think I heard Alex Smith kind of teed off on Ron Rivera on the Monday Night Football broadcast, I
Yeah,
want to say. And
there's probably some bad blood there.
yeah, there may be, but he was just saying, he's like, I'm not sticking up for Carson Wentz, but they have way more issues. There are other issues there than just the quarterback position. And to single him out in that scenario just doesn't seem like a very professional or fair thing to do.
There have been rumors that he's not the best teammate, but not because he's just an overt dick. But I think his religious proclivities and his outwardness about that have made it a little bit difficult to really be his teammate. And I mean, Philadelphia responded when Nick Foles came in, and that's why I brought it up because he was going to be the MVP that year. He might have actually won the MVP. I can't remember. Remember, he got hurt at the end of the year and they ended
Yeah.
up going on this run. The team never really responded after that. The next year, they went to the playoffs and he got hurt again, and Nick Foles came in, and the team was rejuvenated to the point that you thought that the Eagles were going to make a run to it. The Colts really never responded to him. I mean, they petered out at the end of the year. They should have made the playoffs last year, and they inexplicably lost to the Jags, which was just horrendous. And now the Commanders look listless. I know they have a lot of issues, but I do wonder if Carson Wentz is part of the issue just because he's not that good, I don't think, but also maybe he's not the best teammate in terms of just being able to work with him and relate to him.
Yeah, he's surely part of the issue, but I think that there is plenty to go around in Washington.
For sure. Couldn't be happening to a worse organization, too, by the way. Speaking of organizations that have been middling in mediocrity, the Detroit Lions. So these are your Detroit Lions, coach. Man Campbell, coming into the season, was the most betted on coach to win Coach of the Year. And they traveled to Foxborough, Massachusetts. And Bill Belichick with Bailey Zappi. I'm going to say that name again because it's comedically funny. Bailey Zappi. He is a starting quarterback in this league now. And they went to Foxborough with their highest scoring offense in the league and put up 0 points against a third string quarterback in New England and left the building 1-4, having lost 29 to nothing to the New England Patriots, who are nothing special. Man Campbell is on his way to being fired.
Yeah, and I hate to see it because he seems like a really likable guy, the type of guy I'd love to sit down and have a couple beers with. And just, so that makes me upset to see it happen to him. And it's only a matter of time, I'm sure. I'll say this much, and it doesn't go very far in the NFL, but he has his team playing hard. I think they play hard. I think they give great effort. I think they're bought into his whole mantra, and they're sort of an embodiment of his personality, which is great to see because you don't see that all the time. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't translate into wins, you're not going to be there for very long, right? NFL stands for not for long, and Dan Campbell is not going to be in Detroit for long, unfortunately.
And I'm amazed every time people start to doubt Bill Belichick. You've been high on him and you even said I don't want to stroke him too much, but this is the quintessential Bill Belichick game. You got a team coming in. I know the Lions were 1-3, but they've kind of been that plucky team, scoring a lot of points. People have been getting behind them the way you have. And Bill Belichick has been told he's not the same without Brady. He can't coach anymore. The game has passed him by, and he does exactly what he has to do. The defense plays well. Bailey Zappi does what he has to do. I think it was 17 to 21 for a buck 88. I called him Sam Bradford, and they did efficiently win the football game, and that's what they need to do. And to me, that's why you have a guy like Belichick, because he knows so much about the game, and there's no way that he's going to be fooled into losing a game because he's seen everything.
No, I love Bill Belichick. I think that what he's been able to do there, especially after Tom Brady, has been outstanding, and he does not get enough credit for his part in the dynasty, but which is unfortunate. But I do think the history will reflect fondly on him and his legacy. He's definitely the best NFL coach we've seen, at least in my lifetime, and I don't know that you can really even argue with that. And the fact that he's still doing it at a high level with definitely lesser talent. I don't think anyone could look at these rosters and compare them to the ones he had when they were running off Super Bowls. He definitely outdoing his predecessor in New England, Pete Carroll, who is surprisingly still employed in Seattle after some of the bad teams he's had over the years.
By the way, one of the best facts ever about the Patriots is that Matt Patricia is the offensive coordinator, former Lions coach who they had to fire because he was so bad, and ends up having that game. It's amazing. But yes, the Seattle Seahawks. So at the end of last year, I think I was on the train that Pete Carroll needed to retire. I said that he was done because it seemed as if his success was more in the past than it was in the present. And Russell Wilson gets traded. We hear a whole bunch of things. They end up getting Drew Lock, and they have Geno Smith, who they've had for a while. Geno Smith has been widely panned for many reasons as a pro quarterback. He had a great career at West Virginia. And so we all thought the Seahawks were going to be bad. They lost this week, but Geno Smith might be playing some of the best quarterback in the entire league. I was looking at his stats today. The guy is slinging it, and he's making Russ look bad. And I'm here to ask you, is it possible that Geno Smith could be an MVP candidate or in the conversation for MVP right now?
No, he's not going to be in the conversation, unfortunately for him. But because I think he's a great player, he's got exceptional arm talent, and there's no denying that. If you watch the guy play, he can sling it, and it's fun to watch. I do think eventually they'll level out in Seattle. He'll kind of regress to the mean per se, and but that's not an indictment on him. I mean, if he had this talent all along, he would have been starting somewhere all along. Like you mentioned lightning in a bottle. Maybe he's caught a little lightning in the bottle. He's going to ride that wave for as long as he can. But we've seen Ryan Fitzpatrick do this several times where he catches a hot streak and looks fantastic and things like that. And I'm not taking anything away from Geno Smith. I think he's a really talented quarterback. I just don't think you're going to see it sustained throughout the entire season.
How much of a factor do you think is motivation? Because coming into this season, Russ leaves and basically everybody says, "Oh, that's it. The Seahawks are done. Geno Smith is trash." I've had somebody tell me like, "Thanos, Geno Smith is inevitable. You just kind of know what you're going to get." And he's out there to prove something. And you've played probably or coach kids who feel like they have something to prove because maybe one coach doesn't think they're any good or some of the players don't think that they're good. And How much do you think that that factors in at a pro level? I mean, he's been playing football his whole life, but even as a professional, you have to take some of those things personally, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And at this point in his career, he may realize that this is sort of his last chance to lock down a long-term starting position, maybe get himself a really nice contract, something that he can be set for life and whatever financially as a result of. So I do think there's some motivation there to take advantage of this opportunity that he has right now because there may not be many or any more down the road.
Yeah, so you don't get that many opportunities in the NFL. There's only 32 coaches, 32 starting quarterbacks. So you got to make the most of what you got. And I guess he beat out Drew Lock, which I thought was a ridiculous indictment of Drew Lock's talent or lack of talent. And I think he's proven Pete Carroll right. Like Pete Carroll chose the right guy at least for now, and they're just going to ride with it. Just like the Bills are riding with Josh Allen. Holy shit, the Bills are insanely good.
I was high on Josh Allen when he came out of college. I remember, all the pundits, the one that sticks in my mind was Colin Cowherd talking about how he thought that he was inaccurate and yeah, he's got a big arm, but the accuracy issues and turnovers, interceptions, blah 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 blah. Didn't play a competitive schedule at Wyoming. How's that going to translate to the NFL? And I'm like, man, you watch that guy play, and I'm like, he's a dude, and he's been that guy. And at the same time, I think Cowherd kind of lost credibility for me, anyways, because I remember he was super super high on Josh Rosen and thought Josh Rosen was just going to be a killer in the pros, and he was absolutely not at all by any stretch of the imagination. But back to Josh Allen, he's is so much fun to watch. So much fun to watch. Like if I had someone who had never watched the game of football before, and they're like, "Hey, show me this football game you're talking about," I would be like, "Let's wait until the Bills play. You need to watch Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs for 3 hours."
What a terrible first game for Kenny Pickett to start in, too. I mean, there's no good game to start in, but playing in Buffalo against that team. And I said to you, too, like after they lost to the Dolphins, they looked impressive. And I really think they took that loss personally because they are not out here fucking around and putting 38-3 against Pittsburgh. And again, Mike Tomlin teams, maybe this team isn't as talented. They have a rookie quarterback, but they're always well coached and they never usually get blown out like this. This is definitely new territory for Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, it's sad to see, but I do think we're on the backslide of the Steelers dynasty as we've known it from being a top tier team in the AFC. I think it's going to take them a few years to sort of regroup and get back into things. It wouldn't surprise me if they've got several more losses like the one they took this weekend ahead of them this year.
I just feel like the Bills are the clear best team in the NFL right now, at least again, the way that they're playing. Doesn't mean that that will end up in a Super Bowl ring, but they're certainly ascending and they seem to be heading in that trajectory. But it's only October, so there's a lot of football to be played, except for Matt Rule. Matt Rule, former coach of the Carolina Panthers, was fired after an abysmal outing against the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, the 49ers put up 37 points. The Jimmy G led 49ers haven't really done that a whole lot. Baker is hurt. He's going to be out 2 to 4 weeks. I did read today that apparently the Bills called up the Panthers and asked about Christian McCaffrey. It seems like the Panthers are in a complete rebuild now, and Matt Rule is probably going to go back to college, I would think. But what did you think of the firing this early in the season?
It didn't surprise me. We'll probably see a couple others here pretty soon. Dan Campbell being one of them. So it's not shocking, I think, especially with some of the other issues they have there with the quarterback position. You might as well just rip the band aid off, burn this thing down, and rebuild it. It wouldn't surprise me if you do see McCaffrey traded at some point in time because I don't think that he is going to be, he doesn't have enough meat on the bone to survive a rebuild. I don't think to where he could be a part of a winner. I know that the turnaround time in the NFL is a little shorter than it is maybe at the college level or in other pro sports, even. But I just think that you might as well pile up some draft picks so you can rebuild this thing and go ahead and deal McCaffrey. The Baker thing, I've always been kind of a Baker fan. I like him a little bit. I like the chip he has on his shoulder. I saw he kind of got in a heated exchange with the reporter in the press conference because this particular reporter asked him if he's considered any drills to work on basically finding holes in the pocket since he's so short, finding gaps to throw to. And he's like, "You have a drill? Tell me a drill. Tell me your drill then that you have." Like, I mean, he was going at the guy pretty good, which I appreciate that. Most of those idiots out there asking questions have no idea what it's like to be in that situation. So no, I don't. I'm not surprised though. I'm always kind of puzzled or skeptical when you see these college coaches jump to the pros, especially the ones like Matt Rule. He had a good little stretch at Baylor, but it wasn't crazy. And to see that jump, and like we've talked about, Cliff Kingsbury taking that jump from Texas Tech to Arizona, some of those are kind of puzzling to me when they happen.
Traditionally, some of those college coaches don't really work out. I mean, Pete Carroll came from college to the pros, but he had been in the pros. He was the Patriots coach after Bill Parcells. So he'd gone and kind of figured some things out and was very successful at USC. And I think he learned a lot from having failed in the NFL. But when you go right from college to the pros, it's a really difficult transition because Urban Meyer found that out. You can't treat the pros the way that you treat the kids that are on scholarship. And these pros are making more money than you are in some cases. So it's a different culture. And I think Matt Rule, to me, hadn't coached enough high level, college, or even been like a coordinator in the NFL, at least to my knowledge. So I think it was just very, very difficult. But remember last year they fired Joe Brady, who was a great offensive coordinator for LSU when they won a national title. And that seemed like a scapegoat move. Like it wasn't really his fault. And I don't know where Joe Brady is today, but I think he's hopefully got a job somewhere because he was a good offensive coordinator.
Yeah, you see that a lot when things start going south. I think we saw it even at it didn't happen in Nebraska when before Scott Frost left and after like that
Hmm.
first loss they fired a coordinator or both coordinators. I don't know. But you start that's the first that's how you know you're in trouble because someone's probably coming to you and say, "Well, it's time to start making changes." And so you got to fire coordinators or coaches and you're usually not too far after that happens, but agreed, though. A lot of these college coaches have not translated well. Look at Chip Kelly, right? Chip Kelly went. I mean, he had a little bit of success, but nothing sustainable. And then now he's back at the college level, doing pretty well.
Great transition, by the way. So there, NCAA, we had a lot of things actually to talk about. There's no way we could get to all of it. I mean, I guess we could talk for like 4 hours and do that, but who's going to listen to that? I have to ask you a fundamental question. Your boy, Jimbo Fisher, seems to always like kind of come back. He's like a buoyant buoy. He just keeps like bouncing up and down, up and down. And they played Bama tough this week. Is there such a thing as a moral victory for him at this point? I mean, is losing to Bama by only four, does it really matter for them? Because their season's pretty much cooked.
I do think it helped because if they would have got the doors blown off them by Bama, we might be talking about him being fired this week. And so he's another one of those guys that I think he's on a week by week basis. I know there shouldn't be any moral victories, especially at that level, but I do believe that they think it is one, even if it was against a backup quarterback, right?
Yeah, and Nick Saban seems to have trouble with teams from Texas this year because that's now two games in which they have struggled and had to basically claw their way out of the stadium against the team from Texas. And I wondered to myself, is Alabama another one of those? They get the benefit of the doubt every year. They're sitting in the top five and they win the games they have to win. But I do wonder without Bryce Young, are they really going to be able to be in the playoff picture in earnest? Or are they really, I don't know. I don't get that same feeling about Alabama, even though Bryce Young is very talented.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things play out because Alabama's got a few tough games on the schedule yet, even before the SEC championship rolls around. And, they're going to have to take care of business if they want to be in that conversation. Now, I have no doubt they'll be prepared to do so, whether they do or not. I think it's going to have more to do with how their opponents play than how Alabama plays. I think Alabama's going to come out and be Alabama, but have these other teams taken big enough steps to, um, be up to the task?
And a little bit of a preview. Tennessee rolled over your boy Brian Kelly at LSU. It was a whitewash, 40-13. Tennessee is for real, and LSU is not quite for real, despite having a number next to their name this week. They got the doors blown off them at home. I think it was the worst home loss for Brian Kelly ever.
Yeah, big time BK or big game BK showed up this weekend. I've seen this version of Brian Kelly many times over the years where the moment when the moment arises to have a marquee win or a big win over a higher ranked opponent, um, he seems to never be able to have the team ready to compete. We saw him I saw him screaming in some coaches' faces throughout the game and things like that. He made some mentions during the halftime interview and the post game press conference about being out coached and coaching. So I think that while he's saying some of the right things as far as taking some of the blame himself, he's throwing some of his coaches under the bus as well. On the Tennessee side, Hendon Hooker, I think that if the Heisman Trophy were to be voted on today, he'd be a tough guy to beat. And I'm sure that the CJ Stroud fans in Ohio State would disagree. But if you look at the body of work and what he's done so far this season, it'd be hard to pick anybody over him.
I said that to you 2 weeks ago, and you told me it was wrong because it was CJ Stroud.
N-
So eat a fat one the way that you
I stand corrected, man. I stand corrected. He looks so good. Now I'll say this much though, in full transparency, Saturday is the first time I've watched him at length, for a whole football game, and I was really impressed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you think we don't ever disagree. But, the SEC, man, we always talk about this every week how each of these teams is so good and the talent, even for teams that are kind of bottom feeders in the SEC, those teams are probably better than most of the other teams in other divisions. And at South Carolina, who's really a joke, and they haven't really been successful since Spurrier was there. Maybe they have a win or two here, but they beat Kentucky and they find a way to win. And it just shows you how tough the SEC is. And even if we think a team is ascending, it takes one loss, and then next week they lose again. And Kentucky now is reeling, and South Carolina gets a big win. And Shane Beamer, Frank Beamer's son, I have a little bit of a soft spot for the Beamer family, of course. It was nice to see him get that signature win because I know a lot of people that live in South Carolina who were getting a little frustrated.
Yeah, he's coaching for his job a little bit, and there may be a little bit of desperation there, but it's nice to see the parity, especially within that conference and how good all the teams are top to bottom. I do think that it's hard to become a sustainable top tier team in the SEC. We've seen, Kentucky's sort of been slowly climbing the ladder the last few years. Tennessee's sort of been slowly climbing the ladder. A&M's definitely had the talent to be up there, but to do what Alabama's done and Georgia's doing, and just be able to maintain that level at the top of the conference amongst so many other highly talented and well coached football teams is hard to do. And you see that right there. Kentucky is maybe not quite ready for the big time in the SEC because if you can't fend off a not very good South Carolina team, then the last thing you're going to be worried about is Georgia or Alabama.
And think about what you just said. Alabama and Georgia are consistent, but think about how many years it's taken for some of these SEC schools to be ranked even. I mean, Kentucky was bottom of the barrel. There was a guaranteed win on your schedule many years. It's taken them years to even get there and then to not even be close. It just shows you how difficult the SEC is. And when you come in as a new coach and Brian Kelly is finding this out, it's not as easy as you think it is. Just because you have a lot of success doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden going to go to an SEC school and you're going to jump right in. I mean, good for him recovering from that first week loss, but they rattled off 4 straight wins and then got absolutely creamed the next time they had a good opponent. And so Kentucky even being in the conversation just shows you the strength of the conference, but also it's hard to do. And your boy Mike Leach is doing it now. Got another big win this week, crawling up into the top 15. I can't wait because he's got a couple trap games, I'm sure, coming up. He always is due for one of those stupid losses.
Oh, absolutely, and we'll talk about that in crunch time because I see that game on the docket. So we'll kind of discuss that further when we get to that point. But one thing as far as about the SEC goes, that I do have a beef with is some of the bottom feeder teams, and those teams that come to mind, like Vanderbilt and like Missouri, South Carolina. You could even argue that even those teams, kind of pound their chest like, yeah, it's the SEC, it means more. And I'm like, when's the last time you won a game in the SEC? Type of thing. They kind of ride coattails a little bit, and Mississippi State has traditionally maybe been one of those programs, and Mike Leach has them rolling. I love that guy, and yeah, they're going to have their work cut out for them. They've got a lot of tough games left on the schedule, but I would love nothing more than to see them keep winning.
I would love for Ole Miss and Mississippi State to be undefeated when they play each other. That would be fantastic because that game hasn't mattered in a really long time.
No, it would be fantastic. It'd be absolutely awesome. And Lane Kiffin's another guy, man. I kind of got a little soft spot for.
You do. And speaking of teams that I have soft spots for, the Kansas Jayhawks, I don't really want to say soft spot, but I've wanted to give them a little bit of a highlight because they have been terrible and they played pretty well against TCU. And I know you said they were going to win handily or comfortably or whatever the word was. And I call them scrappy. And again, maybe that doesn't mean anything. It's a moral victory, but I think they had their first primetime game. College Game Day was there. which is pretty incredible that they went to Kansas. Think about this for a second. And so to play well and not get blown out on national television, I think that's a good thing for the program. It seems as if they're playing in a positive direction. Kansas State wins, and they're gonna be ranked still. So it's amazing to see these schools and in these areas that we've been just not really paying attention to play well. You hope that it lasts for as long as it can, because as you pointed out, parity is the best thing that could happen to college football.
Yeah, I think it's awesome when you have teams like this that pop up for a year or two and they're competitive and definitely when they're having more success than they traditionally have. The unfortunate part about it is these successful seasons usually lead to these coaches that build that up being hired away, and now you're back to square one. I hope that doesn't happen maybe in this case, but it likely will. I'm sure that the head coach at Kansas and even Kansas State will be hired away to better higher marquee positions. And but that's just how the wheel turns.
And we'll probably talk about that when we get to college basketball, because I'm sure that plagues Bradley every now and again.
Unfortunately, we've kind of talked about this. Me and my dad talk about this all the time. That they've never, in my lifetime, they haven't had a coach that was hired away for a better job. And it's almost because they stayed too long. They didn't leave soon enough. When I was a kid, the coach was Jim Molinari, and Bradley made the NCAA tournament in '96, had a really good team. They had made the NIT consistently. I mean, I think they fired him after making the NIT for like 5 straight years, and they fired him. That's how highly Bradley, I guess, thought about themselves. But I heard he had interest at like St. John's and places like that, and whether he was offered those jobs or not, I don't know, but ultimately, he probably could have left and taken a better job at some point, and then his replacement, Jim Les, maybe same type of deal. After the Sweet 16 season, he probably could have parlayed that into a better gig, and he stuck around a little too long, ended up getting fired. So I don't know. We'll see what happens to the current coach, Brian Wardle. He's pretty good. They should have a pretty solid team this year, and it wouldn't bother me one bit if Bradley turned into one of those springboard type jobs, like a like you saw Butler be for a long time, or some of these other mid majors where you're just a stepping stone for great coaches. Because if they're that good and they're getting hired away, like you're always going to get the next best guy in most cases.
I guess I never considered a guy staying way too long and overstaying his welcome. And I guess in college basketball, you see that more at these schools where guys will stay for a really, really long time because they have some success. But a lot of guys now are kind of skipping town. So I guess that means you've kind of made it as a mid major when that happens. But in football, it's inevitably going to happen all the time. You're never going to have the guy like the days of Frank Beamer, those are over. Guys are never going to stay at schools like that for very long because they want to take that stepping stone. I mean, if Brian Kelly left Notre Dame when he probably could have been the Notre Dame coach forever, unless they all of a sudden started being really bad, and then he just decided, I'm going to go to the SEC, that means every single coach is in play at this point.
Yeah, I would say so. There's a few untouchables. Saban's not going to go anywhere from Alabama. I don't think. I think he'll retire from there. But other than that, you probably hit the nail on the Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. He'll probably never go anywhere from there. But after their performance this year, I don't know who the hell would want to hire him.
No,
But there's a couple of those guys. But no, you're right. You don't see those long term. The Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechlers and Frank Beamer. You don't see that so much anymore.
last thing before we move on, Notre Dame played really well against BYU. And I have to ask you, man, are they kind of making a little bit of a comeback? Are you feeling better about Marcus Freeman?
Yeah, I'm feeling good about the direction they're headed. I think they're figuring some things out. And I was honestly a little surprised they didn't at least sneak into the top 25 after the win over, ranked BYU. But, time will tell. They're going to have plenty of opportunities throughout the rest of the season. They've got a few ranked teams left, that includes Clemson and USC at some point. So they'll definitely have a chance to uh, get back into the national scene. Now they're definitely not a playoff team. They're likely not a New Year's Six Bowl caliber team this year, but they should. I expect them to get back into the top 25 here at some point.
They can't with two losses, right?
What's that? Like they
N-
can't.
New Year's Six.
Yeah, I'm not even sure, man. Like what the parameters are on that as far as record and things like that go.
I just mean because a lot of the other teams that are going to be considered are probably like SEC teams with one loss or two losses or something, and so the strength of schedule probably will matter a little bit.
For sure.
All right. Well, I want to say one more thing before we move on. And my friend Letitia, who is listening, she's a big Texas fan. She went to Texas. So hook 'em for that 49-0 thrashing of Brent Venables and the sad Sooners.
Yeah, that's awesome. It was I was surprised. I thought that Oklahoma would at least put up a little bit of a fight, but they did not manage to do so at all. But I think Texas is another one of those programs that when they're rolling, college football is better, and their addition to the SEC here in the future, I think, is going to make that conference absolutely ridiculous. It'll be fun to watch them competing with the Alabamas, Georgias, LSU's of the world, Tennessee as we move forward.
It sure will. And you'll hear all of that news on the Iceman and Coach Sports Show. And that means we're moving on, and it is time, man. It's time for that weekly segment, Crunch Time, where Brad and I go back and forth, rat-a-tat-tat, and give our thoughts about 10 games throughout the slate in sports. And we are going to start. But first, Brad, I've got a little bit of a surprise for you. Do you remember NFL primetime?
Yes, I do.
Copyright infringement coming along. We're going to start. Number 10, Penn State travels to number 5, Michigan. The Big Ten finally gets a great game. I'm going Penn State here.
I tell you what, they've gotten a bad rap for a poor schedule early on, but I'm buying Michigan now, especially at home at the Big House. Give me the Wolverines.
All right, number 3, Alabama travels to number 6, Tennessee. Rocky motherfucking top.
So we got Alabama at Tennessee. I think it's going to be a good game. I think Tennessee's really talented. I think they'll keep it close, but I'm on the Tide.
Number 8, Oklahoma State. Brad's pick of the week, I'm sure. At number 13, TCU. It's that time for Oklahoma State to be losing because Brad loves them, so give me the Horned Frogs.
Love me the Cowboys. I'll take the Cowboys on the road to assert themselves as the best team in the Big 12. Sorry, Horns.
Number 25, JMU. You heard that correctly. First time being ranked. They've first year in the FBS, traveled to Georgia Southern. The only reason I had it on here is so I could give you that stat. Give me JMU.
Yeah, I'll take James Madison. Seeing them pop up in the FBS and crack into the top 25 in their first year is exciting. So I'll take them.
And number 16, Mississippi State travels to number 22, Kentucky. This feels like a trap game. Kentucky's reeling after 2 losses. Give me the Wildcats.
Yeah, this is that game that Mike Leach loses every year as soon as you think that he's getting his team into contention. I agree. I will take Kentucky reluctantly.
And we move to the NFL. The New York Football Jets travel to Lambeau Field to take on Aaron Rodgers. I like the New York Jets here.
Young head coach, young quarterback at Lambeau against Aaron Rodgers. I'll take the Packers.
The Baltimore Ravens travel to the Meadowlands to face the inexplicably 4-1 New York Giants. The Giants are frauds. Give me Lamar and the Ravens.
This is the week that proves us all wrong about the Giants, and we realize that they are a force to be reckoned with. I think they contain Lamar and run away with the victory. I'll take the G-Men.
The Buffalo Bills continue their murderer's row as they travel to Kansas City to face the Kansas City Chiefs. Easily going to be the game of the year, probably. I actually like the Kansas City Chiefs here only because they're at home.
I wonder what the over-under on this game is. It's got to be like 75 or something. There's going to be so many freaking points scored in this game. I will take the Bills. I just think they're too freaking good. Give me the Bills on the road.
The Dallas Cowboys travel to Philadelphia in an NFC East showdown, and the Philadelphia Eagles looking to remain undefeated coming in. Cooper Rush, a road game against a pretty tough opponent. I'm actually going to take the Eagles here.
I'm feeling frisky, man. I'm feeling frisky. I'm buying into Cooper Rush. And I think right here is where the Eagles get exposed for the frauds that they are. I will take Cooper Rush and the Cowboys.
And last, the Cardinals and the Flying Cliff Kingsburys travel to Seattle to face Geno Smith, MVP, and the Seattle Seahawks. Give me the Seahawks with a chip on their shoulder.
I'm with you on the Seahawks, and I think this is a game that firmly puts Cliff Kingsbury on the hot seat.
And there you go, folks. Crunch time with a little bit of background music, of course. You know, we got to get the production right. We will get it right at some point, folks. Don't you worry about that. I have a lot of fun doing that every week, man. It's just, back and forth, back and forth. And, we're doing it as good as anybody else in the business right now.
No, it's super exciting. It's my favorite part of the show. I look forward to it the most for sure. And I don't know, man. Maybe we need to talk about it. Maybe we just do the whole show rapid fire.
Yeah, we just do 10-minute shows where we just go back and forth and don't say more than like two words. We just go boom, 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 boom. We could talk about everything and anything in sports and basically be that show that literally has no scope.
No kidding, right? That I don't know. It'd probably be exciting, but there wouldn't be much context.
And that sound means it is time for OTW, where Iceman and Coach give you their own personal flair. And we always start with the Iceman's stat of the week. So, hearkening back to your pick of the week last week, the Chicago Bears, I found a wonderful stat about the Chicago Bears franchise that I wanted to share with all of you because it is just hilariously funny. Tom Brady has 23,996 career passing yards and 174 touchdowns in his 40s alone. That's 500 more yards and 20 more touchdowns than the Bears' all-time passing leader, Jay Cutler. Tom Brady playing only in his 40s would be the Bears' leading passer in team history.
That's absolutely insane, but I'm not surprised by that stat one bit. I've watched a lot of terrible Bears football in my lifetime. That doesn't surprise me at all.
Unbelievable. And one more thing before we get to the other main segment here. Blake Bortles recently retired, ended his career having been paid $48 million. So congratulations to him. Blake Bortles played in 78 games and threw 75 interceptions. So not a great stat.
Stellar, man. Stellar. Sign me up for that job.
Friends, sports fans, degenerate gamblers, lend me your ears. Come and hear the future. Witness the seer of seers, the soothsayer of the people. It is time for the coach's pick of the week.
Hear ye, hear ye. We got off the schneid, sort of, last week with the Bears at +7 with the Vikings. This week, I found a line that I thought was one of the most astonishing lines I've seen so far this year. USC is a 3.5-point underdog at Utah. Now, I know we were high on Utah early in the season, but after the loss at Florida, we became very skeptical. The pundits in Vegas must know something about this team that we do not know, because it seems they have been disappointing in every game they've played that has had any sort of national bearing on it or rankings affiliated with it. So I will take USC +3.5 at Utah.
USC +3 at Utah. So let it be written. So let it be done.
And there you have it, folks. OTW is over, and we have reached the end of the show inexplicably. It goes by so fast, my man, but I hope you liked the little medieval flair. Last week, we kind of stumbled upon something funny, and I gave you the stained glass treatment for anybody who's watching on YouTube, the coach in stained glass form. I think you look pretty good, man.
Yeah, I might have to see if I can get that and make it like my profile picture or something on social media. It'd definitely be an upgrade.
I do like it. I do like it. Now, unfortunately, being 1-3-1, it's not as sexy as 1-4. But hey, you know what? Having that tie there, everybody loves making fun of ties, and it's like kissing your sister. So there you go, man. 1-3-1 heading into the next week.
Hey, we'll take it. We'll take it. It's better than a loss, and we're moving in the right direction. I think that I feel really good about this week's pick, and we'll see how things play out on Saturday.
And there you go, folks. We have reached the end of the show this week. The Iceman and Coach Sports Show. It's going to take me a while to get that. I've been calling it Drippin' Sports now for a year and a half. But Brad, do you have any parting thoughts for Icetime Nation before we get out of here?
No, nothing great. Just another great show, another fun show with a lot of content that I enjoyed. It gets better and better every week. And then I think going into maybe our first weekend that is, kind of, I won't call it packed, but it has a decent slate of games that have some meaning to them, especially on the NCAA level. So looking forward to that.
As am I. Before we get you out of here, don't forget to check out the Pub Time podcast, where you can find Coach in his other form, and MattySmedia.com for the other podcasts that I'm a part of and what we support. It means the world to us. If you're listening on Apple and Spotify, give us a follow, give us some stars. It means the world. Brad, until next week, this is Iceman and Coach.